We're going to talk about Rush and we're going to look at the catalog, but I think the best way to break up Rush is to break it up into 5 stages. So we're going to be talking about the 5 stages of Rush, and this is going to be a heavily edited video. I was just playing a little bit of a song called Working Man, and it comes from the first. It comes from the first album. This is going to be heavily edited because I'm just going to be flying off the fucking top of my head. When I think of the first album, and again, so let me break this down. The first stage of Rush encompasses their first album through their fourth album, 2112, and it wraps up with their first live album called All the World's a Stage. But the first record up until the first live record is sort of how we're going to cap off the first stage of the five. It starts with this record right here, Rush, and just so Mazzy doesn't freak out, I'll pull the cover up out of the plastic. The obvious thing that everybody would talk about is that Neil is not on that record and John Rutsey is, right? So that's not the point. Working Man is something that I think is the last song that they played with Neil, possibly. You know, it stayed in the set list the whole time. His voice is a rarefied taste. It's high in pitch. Get over it. And if you can't, then all right, it's not for you. But you're missing out on an extremely intricate and developing catalog of music by a three-piece band that played like a 10-piece band at times. If your mind is set on I just want to hear 3 minutes and then move on, well then, move on. But that's not what Rush is here to do at this point in time. They're here to stretch the boundaries of storytelling and music and incorporating the idea of words and music and all this kind of stuff. And Fly By Night also does have the, simple. Oh, sorry, Mazzy. Fly By Night's like a shortened sort of little radio staple, right? You know, and they're doing short form songs. They're starting to expand the long form songs, and then it comes to fruition on Caress of Steel, their third album, the second with Neil involved, and there's an entire side of this record dedicated to a big long song called "The Fountain of Lamneth." Like I think I'm going bald, right? Bastille Day is on here, another kind of a short, succinct rock tune with some progressive elements to it. This point, they were struggling to stay alive, really. The record company was kind of like, this isn't working, and they were, I think, getting out. They were outnumbering their audiences at some shows, and they were given an ultimatum. And it said, like, look, get with the program and, get cracking on some hit tunes, or, we're going to have to probably drop you or something like that. They decided, we'll go down swinging. One against many. 2112. The first appearance of a naked guy. And then also the first appearance of male camel toe. That's why Alex Lifeson is my hero. No shame in that game. 2112, considered by many to be a masterpiece. I've listened to it a bazillion times, as many other people have, and it's a great frickin' concept. And somehow, what they were doing here for 18 to 20 minutes somehow was overcome by what they did here for 18 to 20 minutes. This starts to get that shiny Rush exterior, that sort of open-ended, airy sound. It's a darker sound on Caress of Steel. But to be honest with you, I don't think it's the production that had anything to do with it. I think everything has to do with the songwriting, and the idea of 2112 spoke to the people that were listening. And when you flip the record over and you have, 5 little short songs to sort of appease the record company or the masses or whatever it is that you're trying to appease by doing something that you don't want to do, then you get this, an ode to dope smoking against the powers that be, finds musical happiness, and then turns it into a display of defiance, possibly against a power that's not I don't know, listening, whatever. Who knows, man. And there's also a lot of flack here because the Ayn Rand thing just was all, That's stage one. And stage one's capped off with naked dude, in front of the oppressive logo. Could be Coca-Cola. That would have been a good one. You just have to turn it upside down. And that's Motley Crue. All right, we'll cut all this shit out. All the World's a Stage. Oh, God, see, you create so much work for other people. There it is. It's about the performances. So what we now have is we have 73-ish, 74-ish, up to 76-ish. And we're about to go into stage 2. And I'm going to have to put these ones back and grab stage 2. So there'll be an edit here. Stage 2. How do we come out of that? We have watched our Canadian heroes go from, bar band obscurity to prog lords with 2112. They come up with a Farewell to Kings. And again, this isn't scripted. I'm just talking about it the way that I think about it. Things like Xanadu. And Xanadu is another concert staple that lasted for a long time, 10 plus minutes or whatever. I think it's on side 1. I think Xanadu is the, now here I am after I said I wasn't going to look at the cut, the thing I'm looking at. I just wanted to make sure it's on side 1 because I think that side 2 ends with what becomes the new angle of Rush, which would be Cygnus X1. Right? This takes us into what I think is, for me, for my money, the quintessential prog music of the 70s for me. I'm not excluding, Yes and Tull and all those other bands that did all that progressive music, but for my money and for my tastes and my concerns and just where I happen to be in my head, Rush laid it down right there and then followed it up, double down. So 2112 solves, the are we gonna die as a band on this, cross, or are we gonna continue? And they do. And they go with the live album, and then they follow it up with a really well produced progressive record called A Farewell to Kings, which has a song called Farewell to Kings, and has, Xanadu, and has, Cygnus X1, and then now they're going in a direction that is going to lead us to what became their supposed apex. So the next record is my favorite Rush record, Hemispheres. And you know what? Screw it, Maz. If you don't like the plastic, just tune out. But you're going to miss some good information if you do. Forget about the plastic. There's the naked dude again on a brain with a dude with a suit, and whatever this means to a teenage kid is this is here's me in the parking lot smoking a bowl, and then here's my teacher, and this is the difference between us. I'm just fucking with you. But kids in parking lots all around the world were trying to figure out what the hell was going on here. Dionysus and you know, that was the kind of shit you tuned out on in school. At least in my neck of the woods, we were just like, what? I'm trying to make light of all this because I don't want it to be too serious. It just, from that first F sharp chord that comes in, wham, bam, you get an 18-minute throwdown that is essentially what becomes that late 70s Rush sound. Triumphant. Fanfare. And Geddy's voice is that trumpet on top of the fanfare. And even he admits, you know, that they fucked up. They recorded the whole side of this record, one big long song, and it was in the wrong key. And when he goes to sing, he's like, "Oh my god, I got to get up there." And you know, and even Geddy's saying that, like it was too high, you know. And La Via Strangiato has one of the greatest guitar solos I've ever heard in my life. Especially the live version that comes up later to cap off this stage 2. This is the original 78, I think, red Canadian vinyl. And yes, that is the one that I listen to, even though it's Canadian. And also, I must say that on side 2 also has Circumstances. I don't know. Is Closer to the Heart on here? I don't think it is. I think I might be fucking that up. Is it Closer to the Heart? I just have to make sure. No, it's The Trees. See, I'm a bullshitter. Closer to the Heart's back on A Farewell to Kings. This is why when I'm sitting there going, hey, I'm not looking at the fucking covers, I should be. Closer to the Heart is on here, and that's a big fucking radio hit. The Trees is on here. Circumstances is on here. La Via Strangiato is on here. Hemispheres is on here. They decide to get privy to what's going on in the world, and they start listening to the Police and reggae music and new wave music and, you know, that whole kind of vibe. And they come up with a way for them to say, hey, we're not cork sniffers. We're cool with what's going on in the world, but we also do have our own way of making music. So we're going to incorporate that into this. And you get the Spirit of Radio. You get Free Will. You get Jacob's Ladder. You get Entre No, you get Different Strings, and you get Natural Science. Again, this is a classic album for all time, and I think is arguably as good as Moving Pictures. Dewey Defeats Truman was on there, but they had to get rid of it. This is Rush, I think, firing on all cylinders. This is the quintessential 70s Rush record for me. It has everything on there that you could possibly think about when it comes to progressive rock music. And Geddy's still up there, soaring up in the stratosphere. And you're still free to leave if you don't like it. And then we fall upon this the one that everybody knows. Tom Sawyer, Red Barchetta, YYZ, Limelight, Flip It, Camera Eye, Witch Hunt, Vital Signs. How should I get introduced to Rush? Because yes, this is a large catalog. We're only in stage 2 right now. And how should I get involved with Rush? Well, that's probably a good place to start. It's all capped off, stage 2, with Exit Stage Left, which is a phenomenal live recording. But for the most part, it's a really expertly performed and recorded live record. And we should mention that their producer up to this point is Terry Brown, or as they like to say, Bruin. Terry Bruin. Great renditions of Xanadu on here, The Trees, Jacob's Ladder, La Via Strangiato, and this is where I think Alex Lifeson perfected the solo for La Via Strangiato. It's one of the greatest guitar solos I've ever heard in my life. And I'm thinking about Jimi Hendrix. I'm thinking about Eddie Van Halen. I'm thinking about all of the great guitar players. And this is where I say Alex Lifeson is extremely underrated, because this is definitely his version, his solo in La Via Strangiato here is one of the best guitar solos I've ever heard in my life. Anyways, let me reset and we'll do stage 3. Okay. So if Moving Pictures is the apex, followed with Exit Stage Left, the anticipation for the next record, I think we're going into 1982 at this point, was extreme. And they produced Signals. This would have been the second time that I'd seen them, was on this tour. As a teenager living in the suburbs, I did not find this music to speak to me. I felt that at the time I didn't understand why it didn't. I felt that it just they had gone in a direction that I didn't get. But what it really was that they were 10 years older than I was, and they were more mature than I was. And I didn't want to be reminded of, how monotonous and tedious and gray it was to live as a suburban teenager, because that's what I was trying to do. And I was trying to make a life. So when I heard Subdivisions for the first time, it bummed me out. A lot of people say, well, this is when the synthesizer vibe started. It's possibly, well, I mean, it's true. I mean, there were synthesizers before that, but they became, in the fore at this point in time. But when I now go back and I listen to Subdivisions, Analog Kid, Chemistry, Digital Man, Losing It, a bunch of good songs on there. And I wasn't old enough or wise enough to understand them. And when I finally had a kid, 10, 15 years later, I could then go back and listen to these records and go, oh, yeah, okay. It makes total sense to me now. They were adults, and I was a child. I might just said, fuck it. They're getting too synthy and it's too new wavy, which is exacerbated with Grace Under Pressure, which is their next album, which is even harder for me to swallow at this point in time. Distant Early Warning. You sometimes drive me crazy, but I worry about you. That was the kind of shit that my parents might say to me. If you look at the, the Sears and Roebuck photo on there, you kind of go, wow, where are these guys going there? But when you know Rush and you know the humor and you know how, as seriously as they take themselves, they also don't take the whole thing too seriously because they know what it really is. You learn a lot from them as a musician and as an artist, and you realize that humor has always been a part of it, but it wasn't prevalent back then. Grace Under Pressure is a difficult album for me. It was, 100101 SOS and all of that. Neil was going into a different thing, and I was still trying to be in that, you know, 70s thing. And I think a lot of people were. At least everybody that I was talking to at the time felt the same way. It's like, where are they going right now? There's a lot of synths and the guitar now, and that again, it speaks to excuse me, it speaks to the genius of Alex Lifeson, because now where does he fit in? If Geddy's got all these really thick, deep synthesizer, pads going on, where does the guitar go? And Alex Lifeson had to adapt and create guitars that moved around these synthesizer motifs that Geddy was doing. And they perfected it on this record. Power Windows. Big Money. Grand Designs. Mystic Rhythms. It's on here. Territories, Red Lenses, things like that. Again, see, I'm not going to look at the covers, right? Yeah. But I'm going to. This is, I think, the best of Stage 2. Power Windows and Signals. Signals is very progressive still. And very, still that power trio Rush thing. Geddy was using all four limbs at that point, and at this point I think they just kind of stopped doing that and just started programming synths and stuff. And then it leads to the shiniest record of the period, Hold Your Fire. The opening track on this record, Force 10, is one of the best Rush songs, I think, that they ever did. So let's cap off stage 2. No, 3. Are we on stage 3? Stage 3 still, right? With A Show of Hands, which is the live record that capped off Signals through Hold Your Fire. And as you can see, we're firmly planted in the 80s. We're right there. We got mullets and ponytails and lots of stacks of synths and just... I like this now. I did not like it then. It was hard for me at the time when this came out to listen to this and to make sense of the band that I liked and what they were now. I'm just being honest. It was difficult. But since I've gotten older and I've gotten to the point where I have at least experienced some of the same things, aging and caring about time and understanding how short this whole thing is and what it means to get to a point where you look back and think about, what it is that you have experienced in life and what it means to you and what you plan to do with it going forward. This means a lot to me now. Okay. When it comes to stage 4, there's going to be 2 records that I'm not going to be able to show. And when we get to them, I'll tell you what they are and why. But as we come out of a show of hands and stage 3, we're in the late 80s. The 80s are ending, and Rush releases Presto, Show Don't Tell, was sort of like the single that first came out, and you can tell that the guitar is back. There's still keyboards. There's still 80s production. Like Rupert Hine, I think, is producing this. And I all of a sudden kind of clicked on it, and I went, okay, I can hear the band, that I like, but yet there was also still all the stuff from the 80s, and it helped me sort of kind of absorb some of the things that I didn't like about that 80s version of Rush. And I started to, at this point, be willing to go back and listen and go, yeah, maybe I was a little bit harsh. But then again, I think it was really just me getting older and learning and growing as a person. Then this, and there's like a rap in the title tune. It was difficult. I'm hearing things. I think, what's the song? Yeah. Gonna look at the cover here. Dreamline. Great, great classic Rush tune. Roll the Bones. Stayed with them forever. But, it was, even for a Rush fan, you're watching them go through all this stuff. And then Counterparts, Between Sun and Moon's on here, and Animate's on here, and Stick It Out. Nobody's Heroes on here. Just there's good songs. All of these Rush records have good songs on them. The two records from this period that I do not have are the record that followed that, Test for Echo, and the live record, Different Stages. And the reason why is because I had them on CD. I did not have them on vinyl. I never saw them on vinyl at the time. So I was fine to just have them on CD. And because, to be honest with you, I listened to them and I was kind of like, all right, there they are. They're good and it's fine. But then, something happened in Rush's career that shut the whole thing down. And I'm not going to talk about it. It's not for me to say. But what I can tell you is that, Neil himself explains a lot of it in his book, Ghostwriter. And if you want to pick that book up, then you'd be doing yourself a favor, because you're going to get to find out what it's like to have everything and lose everything and then get it all back. That should give hope to anybody, no matter where you come from, no matter what situation you're in, when tragedy strikes, doesn't matter how much money you have. This period of Rush for me, the fifth stage, is simultaneously the best and the hardest And the reason why is because if you haven't noticed, me talking about my sort of issues with the 80s and early to mid 90s Rush stuff, it was like having a friend who you didn't agree with sometimes, but yet you really loved, and so you were having this conversation with them. And that was the catalog for me up to that point. And then in 97, when everything went really wonky, and for those of you that just don't want to look it up, I'll just tell you very quickly that Neil lost his family in two different incidents that happened like in a year's time of each other, and found himself alone, and nothing that he had experienced up to that point in time was going to make up for the loss that he was experiencing. And we all find out what our character is really when we are confronted with situations like that. And Neil jumped on a motorcycle and drove for tens of thousands of miles and had the wherewithal to document it, not for me or you, but for him as a writer and as a human being. And the book, Ghostwriter, and the subsequent record that they made when he finally pulled out of it, with the song called Ghostwriter, Vapor Trails. And the idea of a vapor trail is that, it follows you, but the farther you go, the more of it dissipates. This record's called Vapor Trails, and it opens with a song called One Little Victory, which is just a blasting double bass thing where you kind of go, okay, there he is, he's back, he's here. Secret Touch, all good songs. The Stars Look Down. There's just a million good songs on this. It got panned for being sort of over crispy in the mastering process, like all records in the early 2000s. It was subsequently remixed, but the vinyl doesn't have that problem. I think that it should be aggressive. It should be crispy, but not to the point that the CD was. I remember being very excited about the record coming out and going down to the record store. It wasn't on vinyl, at least at the record store that I had around me, which was a Tower at the time. And I bought the CD and I put it in, and I was immediately repulsed by the production quality, but the opening Telecaster riff by Alex Lifeson on top of Neil's blazing drums was enough to get me to still listen. So as much as I hated the production quality, the post-production quality on the record, I don't feel that the remix was better. I feel like it weakened the record. I would say that if you can just get this original vinyl copy, you'll be fine. When they toured the Vapor Trails album, and I have the tour record down here. I'm going to stop talking about live records at this point in time, because after this, every fucking time they went on tour, there was a record. So I'm not going to talk about it. But the Russian Rio record, which is the culmination of the Vapor Trails tours, excellent. It's Rush at the height of their abilities. So again, if where do I start? Russian Rio is a good place because you're going to hear all the fucking hits, but they're also 50 years old, playing at the height of their ability at that point in time. Just incredibly good, really good recording. Before that had happened, I saw them pretty early in the tour, and the experience of being a fan and then knowing what Neil had gone through, and then, and we were close, you know, we were right there in a shed, so we were 20 feet from him, you know. It was a bare stage. There was not a lot going on. It was some drums and some amps and some dryers. And do your homework, and you'll find out why the dryers are there. Geddy was playing through a Sans amp, so he didn't need amps. So he just put some dryers as backline, right? And they were spinning. And then you at some point, they'd open the dryer up and pull out a shirt and throw you a shirt. And it would say, I got a shirt from dryer number 2. And then every once in a while, a crew guy would come out and put some quarters in the dryer. It was just, again, it's the humor. The humor was there. And that was, again, it's heart touching because it was a heavy time. Because here we are, you know, all these years later, and Neil's back. He found a reason, you know, to continue and play again. And he had just, before all that, you know, during the Test for Echo record, had redeveloped his style, and he was playing with a traditional grip, and he was playing drums, you know, where you hold the stick sideways. And he was he was playing with Freddie Gruber, and he was learning how to, he was wearing Capezio dance shoes while he was playing drums, and he was learning how to dance, and he was playing Buddy Rich tributes and stuff like that, you know. And then, and for somebody like him, who was such an established drummer, considered by many to be the best of his era, at least, if not the best rock drummer ever, to reinvent himself out of nowhere because he felt he was being too mechanical. You just have to hand it to that guy, and then his life falls apart, you know. It's one of the things, you know, being a fan of music and tangentially related to these artists in degrees of separation. When John Lennon died, I felt a huge sense of loss. And when Neil Peart had his issues, I took it personally. And to be standing there and see him back on the stage, and to see Geddy and Alex and the love between them, and the camaraderie and the brotherhood and the family, you know, and all of us that were in the audience, if any of you were there and you witnessed it, it was a amazing experience. And now I'll say it was capped off with some of the greatest musicianship I'd ever seen. So, you know, however you want to prioritize it. I wasn't thinking about it like how good they played fucking Free Will. I was thinking about it as like, here is somebody who I have invested a lot of trials and tribulations in, and I care about deeply, who has made some great music for me to experience in my lifetime, and has gone through some horrible shit. And I feel for this person, and now they're here, and they're back, and they're doing it, and it gives me hope as a human being that we can come back from anything, you know, anything. And it was and I'm talking about it so much because it was that big of a deal to me to be there and to see it and to witness it. And of course, you know, I wish that it would have lasted longer, but we're not there yet. Snakes and Arrows. Now the band gets back together, huddles in a studio in the mountains in upstate New York, Allaire Studios, and puts together another sort of masterpiece of where they are at the time. Another solid piece of art. Just another solid piece of art by a band that has refound themselves as human beings, man. It's not about this barcode, and it's not about, the credits. It's about these three guys just persevering. And now maybe it becomes clear as to why Rush fans are so adamant, about being Rush fans. It's not about whether you like 2112 or fucking Moving Pictures or Signals or whatever. It's about the human interaction of some people who, just like all of us, have gone through some shit, and yet they also have this other thing that when they get together, they create incredible music together. And the fact that they were able to funnel that life experience into such a great musical interplay, it makes me emotional, as you can tell. I'm emotional about it. And then we resolve stage 5 with Clockwork Angels, which I'm happy to say is not close to my favorite Rush album. But I am happy to say that Neil said when they were performing their final tour that he was glad that they ended with that record, which was exactly the record that he wanted to make. There's a book, it's got a steampunk thing going on. It's a concept album. It's got all those progressive elements that they were known for. And, going back to one of the things that I didn't mention about Vapor Trails, because at first I didn't think it was important to mention, there was no keyboards on it. And I don't think that that's necessary. But, there's a point there, for Alex, and then there's Mellotron on here, so it's not keyboardy, but there's a Mellotron on here, and it works perfectly. And Clockwork Angels, they came around and they toured, and they brought a string section with them because they did some orchestrations. They'd already gone to Abbey Road for Manhattan Project and recorded a string section, but they were very adamant up to this point in time about just the three of them being on stage. So if there was something that needed to be triggered, it was done with a foot or done with a hand or done with a drum pad. And they weren't afraid to do that, but all three of them had to be doing this stuff, and they were very adamant about it. But when they toured this record, they came around and they alternated the set every night. So one night you get this and one night you get that. Sort of like what Metallica is doing right now, where you're just like, no, but they weren't trying to not repeat anything. They came out and they did a set at the beginning that was kind of 80s centric, which was odd because they had just released this Back to the Prague Roots record called The Clockwork Angels, a concept album all the way from beginning to end that tells a story. And then you're going, oh, wow, yeah, they're probably going to do like Cygnus, and they're going to do Hemispheres, and they're going to do all this, and it's going to be like a prog fest. That's not what happened. They came out and they did the first set, which was very 80s synth pop style stuff. But then for the second half, they brought the string section out and they did half of Clockwork Angels at least. or 2/3 of it. And then if you saw them on the next night, they would do the songs at the end that they hadn't done the night before. So they were always doing the whole album. So I obviously saw them 2 times on that tour. And in between there, they did, they did a tour R30, then they did R40, and the R40 one ended up sort of being their, they also did the Time Machine tour. But they 2015 announced they were going to be closing up shop, and I chose to not go because I wasn't ready, to say goodbye. I had no idea that what was going to happen, and it. Even though I now know clearly, I still wouldn't have gone because I didn't want to say goodbye. I didn't want to see a final show. I think in the back of my mind, I figured there'd be some one-off here or there, and catch it somehow. But that's not what happened. Anyway, the 5th stage and the final stage of Rush ends with the Clockwork Angels. Clockwork Angels, there it is. And it's a deep record. Like, if I wouldn't start with it, but if you work your way through, the late 70s, 80s stuff, and you want to find out what they, how they came back to the progressive side of things, and meshed it all together and put it all together in one big package and did one more big final thing with long form songs, that's the record for you. I find it amazing to think about how, for most of my life, I have followed this band. And even when I was arguing, with them, about some of the things, I can also tell you this. My daughter, I took her for her first concert to see this, And on that tour, they played A Passage to Bangkok. And when they did, the venue started smelling differently. And she was like, "What is that?" And I said, "Oh, don't worry, honey. It's just, some perfume. Somebody squirted some perfume. It smells like a skunk." Yeah. But I have some of those family memories and some of those lifelong memories. And I'm happy to say that this band has provided me with a soundtrack for a lot of that stuff. So Rush means more to me than, what their hit songs were or what, records went gold or which records went platinum. I have a lifelong love-hate relationship with these cats, and I feel like they're part of my family. And even though they're not, they are. So there you go. I'm going to try to edit this down into something reasonable. I hope that you find something enjoyable in it. And I appreciate your time. I hope you get a chance to listen to some of the Rush catalog and find a section somewhere in there in one of those stages that you enjoy. There's a lot of different growth and a lot of different musicianship and a lot of different, vibrations. So, cheers. Thank you. Rash.